Ahoy! What's going on? I've been playing video games a good chunk of my life, and I realized I haven't played much of the developer Hideki Kamiya's work. Stuff like the first Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, Okami, The Wonderful 101, and the original Resident Evil 2. Games that are often short but highly replayable, with plenty of depth in their gameplay that years later I'll hear nothing but praise about them. So I'm very curious about this kind of experience. What is it if I get my hands on one of these games, and if I play it, what am I going to think about it? So I found a copy of one of Hideki's titles, Viewtiful Joe, from the Nintendo GameCube, and I decided I wanted to record a couple of playthroughs and get my thoughts, see what I think about him after playing a couple of times, starting from character extra to seasoned action star, in my quest to get good at Viewtiful Joe. Okay, I need to qualify what I consider good. While the game's got a ranking system for parts of a level, going from the worst D for Go to the highest acclaim, Rainbow V rank for Viewtiful, my personal qualification is to beat it on the hardest difficulty, Ultra V rated. If I could do that, I'll consider myself fairly decent. Mainly, I want to see how my view of the game changes the more I play it. If I dig deep and engage with its systems, what am I going to find? Grab a snack or a beverage, get comfortable, and let's rock and roll. Viewtiful Joe takes place on the silver screen in movie land, following our average Joe as the film comes to life and kidnaps his girlfriend Sylvia. With the guidance of his favorite character, Captain Blue, Joe dons the V-Watch and becomes, well, Joe, I guess, but not Red. He hasn't gotten that part figured out yet, so he's gonna put that on the back burner and just focus on kicking butt instead. The setup is short and sweet. Viewtiful Joe is a game that doesn't take its story seriously. It knows it's a goofy action game and embraces that. A way this is reflected is in Joe himself. The more I think about this character, the more he grows on me. At his core, he's a passionate fan. Captain Blue is his favorite superhero. In his regular design, he's got this shirt that says HMD. At first, I thought it was a rock band or something, but as Kamiya stated and in the game's credits, it stands for his Master's Dance, a respectful nod to Captain Blue. Apparel worn before the game kicks off, so that reverence is implied to have lasted for a while. This can also be shown in art for the game, like this piece where Joe's enthralled by this statue in the store window. I've been to anime conventions and I know that look when I see it. When Joe gets the V-Watch and dons his costume, he revels in it. He cheers when racking up points, screams his moves like a Dragon Ball Z character. The guy's having a blast and that enthusiasm's infectious. When talking with bosses, he makes goofy jokes that would fit on the playground, conveyed with a great amount of energy from D. Bradley Barker.
Shows you what you know, fat brain. In movies, there has to be a plot twist. That means things always go wrong once before you get to the happy ending. Hello? Now come on, let's get this over with.
Joe isn't the standard definition of cool. In fact, you could say he's a dork. But ironically, that's what I find makes him cool. It's this sincere enthusiasm that's fun to see in a player character, reminding you not to take yourself seriously. Love the things you love and don't downplay that to fit in. That would be quite a lame box to squeeze yourself into. In a time where sincerity is often viewed as cringy by those who hide behind irony and the popular consensus to shield from embarrassment, I find Joe a breath of fresh air, shown in his iconic catchphrase. So I think Joe is neat, but you may be wondering, how does it play, man? Let's get into the mechanics. Viewtiful Joe is a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up that uses 3D models with this sick cel-shaded art style. With interactivity in 2 dimensions, it's got some unique quirks. I'm sure all this stuff looks overwhelming, but let's ease our way into this. First off, we got dodges. If you see the skull icon, this indicates where an enemy is going to smack, either high or low. If they punch, which is high, you're gonna duck. If they kick or sweep the floor, jump over it. You can hold dodges longer than you may first assume. When you dodge correctly, this confused indicator means they're stunned so you can wail on them with punches or kicks. If they're rubber duckies instead of stars, that just means it's a longer duration. And you'll notice when you dodge and hit enemies, there will be these V's forming in the upper side of the screen. These are V points. When you hear, that's the indication this is going to be ranked in 3 categories. The amount of V points you get, defense, the less you get hit the better, and doing so quickly will increase your time score. When you finish the task, it'll show your grade in each category before popping out an overall grade. The ladder of each part gets tallied into your average episode rank. The styled hearts at the top that I thought were tongues for a while, labeled life, is straightforward. The picture of Joe in the bottom left indicates lives. Think of it like how many times Joe has to get the scene right before starting from the top. Below life is the VFX meter, and this is where it gets interesting. So when Joe henshis for the first time, he unlocks the first VFX ability, slow. Pressing the responding button and time slows down. This skill is going to be really good as the game goes along. Like, check this out. We can slow time for extra frames to dodge hits, and if you stun an enemy, a pink reticle will show up. This indicates a rock-on combo. Hit an enemy with this, and they'll go flying and a multiplier will show up on your V-points. And if you do this to one while the same slow button press, other enemies will have it too. The more enemies you hit with rock-on, the higher the multiplier rises. But before we start kicking and punching people all over the place, remember your VFX meter is going to be decreasing using this. If it runs out, Joe goes back to his street clothes, the combat equivalent of buck naked in public, and you have to wait until the bar reaches baseline to hop back into superhero mode. To increase the meter, we need to collect films scattered in the levels. If we reach this amount here, then bam, the bar grows. But these upgrades are on a episode to episode basis. You'll start back to baseline on episode 2 no matter how high it gets in episode 1. A little further in the level, after fighting the mini-boss Joker, we need to interact with this slot machine. It's going pretty fast, so we need to slow time, hit it, and have the 3 Vs line up to get the key. This is an early example that our powers can be used for more than combat, oftentimes being solutions for puzzles. Later, we get Mach speed, fast-forwarding time, making rapid punches and speeding things up. And I'm going to jump ahead like picking a scene from a DVD menu and mention our last power-up, Zoom. Press the respective button and the camera zooms in on our hero as enemies quiver in fear at Joe's sick pose. Kicking makes a 360 spin, and pairing this skill with slow makes our punches hit like a cement block. Jumping does a torpedo move, and zooming midair will have a ground slam. That's the basics. Dodges, punches and kicks, jumps, HUD info, and powers. The reason I mention all this is to give a mental picture of your toolkit, because if you've played Viewtiful Joe, you may have had the same realization I had. Man, this game's tough. Viewtiful Joe packs a punch. The game's encounters can be tricky, mixing in different enemy types and factors like platforming or gimmicks of a particular stage. An early example, in episode 1, Joe the Hero, right near the end of part 1, is the helicopter mini-boss. It's got a couple of moves. First, it flies from one side to another constantly, deploying enemies that can distract you as it whirls up its machine guns and fires. It also summons rockets. My first time I played this, I was getting punked consistently. In this particular section, I kept mistiming the bullet velocity to smack back to the pilot, and assumed that punching or kicking were interchangeable attack-wise. You know, saying that out loud, that sounds kind of awesome. Like, no big deal, I'm just gonna slow time and smack a bullet into the helicopter that fired it. Yeah, it's just whatever. And I also struggled with bosses too. The end of each episode has you given the old rough and tumble with a member of Shadow, and I got a bone to pick with this Batman Charles III. He's the first boss, and yet this chuckle factory schooled me. For moves, he can turn into bats if you try attacking him normally, making these rings that look like a barbed pull and tear Twizzlers, creating more as the fight goes along. He can torpedo, horizontally or vertically, though vertically is smashing, because they'll knock down stalactites you can uppercut to ground them. In theory, it doesn't seem so bad. It's the execution that's the tricky part. Trying to squeeze some hits in while maintaining the VFX meter and attempting not to plummet is where I struggled. But if you throw yourself at a brick wall enough, it's gonna come down sooner or later. In fact, that mindset can be applied to this playthrough. My first time through Viewtiful Joe was not a showstopper. Nay, it was a player-directed slog. One that was more out of a beginner learning the choreography on the fly than the game being boring. Episode 2, Some Like It Red Hot, captures this well. On the critical thinking side, there were moments I just stood there unsure of what to do for a task, specifically in the Rhino Hotel portion. Much like an actor forgetting their lines and doing the mental gymnastics to figure it out, then once the answer is fed to them, they go, yep, right, that's the one. Combat-wise, in addition to different enemy types, we've got stage factors, like cars driving at max 10 miles per hour, and lasers moving in and out of hit range. Especially with the cars, I'd be so focused on clowning the enemies, my tunnel vision would ignore the vehicle that was seconds away from making contact. Naturally, my first attempt through Viewtiful Joe, I took the mental approach of, it's not my fault, it's the game's, it's just too hard. and that led to a pretty frustrating first time. I enjoyed the game's look, the areas are pretty sweet, and it still kept me on my toes. But with how the game only lets you save in between a stage after finishing part 1 or finishing an episode, anytime the game threw a curveball, like episode 4, The Viewtiful Escape, after fighting another Joe, a duel between a character with similar capabilities to you, you've got a timer to book it out of a submarine before it explodes, leading to some platforming where I was thinking, please, I just want to save my game. A sentiment also felt in episode 5, The Midnight Thunder Boy, an alternate take on the city in episode 2, Shrouded in Night. I loved the look of this place, but the fights were no joke. Starting with the platforming, often there were V canisters that were in a straight horizontal line I would die trying to obtain. These thrower enemies called Gelbies would often lead to deaths. Same with these guys that look like Empire pilots from Star Wars Battlefront 2, the good one, having these 4 attacks, 2 were skull indicated, before going crazy on the others. The end of part 1 of this stage is funny. After all the platforming, the game throws a jet at you. Alright, fine. I fought this before, no big deal. After a good chunk of time and taking a few steps, how about a tank? Okay. You fight the tank. Game. Baby. Please. I just want to save. Yeah, sure thing, man. Just throw hands at this jet real quick. So I do so, and then it's over. Psych, there's a train. Hop onto that real quick. Okay, now you can save. Though the boss banter of this episode is great. It's against this guy who took the form of another Joe in the last episode, Alistair. What a great name for a character, reminds me of that one guy. What's cool about Alistair is how friendly he is. He compliments Joe, admits Jaddo's master plans with casual disinterest, straight up telling you he's doing this for tough fights. When it's over, he takes defeat with grace, telling Joe those moves you did were... And Joe's like,
Beautiful. Well, yeah, that works. I'm Joe. Viewtiful Joe.
Alistair's KO'd from the game, and we move on to episode 6, The Magnificent Five. This is the gauntlet. Remember how I mentioned each stage has a boss at the end? Well, all the bosses from stages 1 to 4, from Charles III and another Joe, to the ones I didn't mention yet, like the Rhino Hulk Davidson,
What's up?
and Sharkman Grand Bruce,
Hey, mate!
fight you back to back with extra health. Dying has you retry back at the fight you died, but with 0 lives, you go back to start. First time playing this in my late teens, this was brutal. In fact, I put the game down trying to do this on V-rated back then. The final boss of part 2 is also quite the challenge. But eventually, after my many retries with the boss and most of episode 7, Joe and Sylvia, I met the final boss, Captain Blue, wanting revenge on the world after it abandoned him in his art. The first part, where we got into mechs, was rough, but the final battle was cool. The student versus the master to decide the fate of the world. And after beating that, you get a cutscene, and that's a wrap. While there were a lot of bits I thought were cool, like the art style, the character designs, the boss banter, the gameplay demanded a lot to where it was frustrating. I thought it felt clunky and unsatisfying. I'm so glad I was wrong. Viewtiful Joe is the kind of game where the second time through is where it really clicks. If the first was a messy rehearsal, the second is showtime, and that's way more fun. This is in part because now you know the puzzle solutions, the downtime is cut drastically. You know the blocking for each scene. Slow to get this platform, punch a hole through the ground to hide from the giant torpedoes, speed time to light these pillars. And because you can carry over your moves and items from your save file, you'll have plenty of V points to pick up anything you missed. Items like bombs and boomerangs I thought were useless for anything but. The boomerang has this horseshoe-like arc when you throw it. It doesn't go exactly where you want it, but if you remember that, you can position it to hit enemies out of reach, like the jetpack fellas or the zapper things. Or, and this one got me to smirk, hitting Charles out of the air and grounding him. Bombs have a similar utility. They can damage enemies, but leave you exposed with pulling it out. Ideally, they're used outside of combat. In levels, there are these pink boxes out of reach. First time through, I just ignored him, but if you launch a bomb and Mach speed punch it, some little Joes spawn and break open the box, and your bombs can also be used for puzzles that require an explosion. Instead of hitting a slot machine or having to move one a particular way, you can just bring one from home and save the trouble. If you experiment with your basic moves, you'll notice that punches send enemies flying horizontally normally, or vertically if you uppercut. Kicks will do so diagonally, and realizing this is a game changer. When doing rock-on combos, because you know directions aren't random, you have more control of fights. Dodge an attack, punch one guy on the right and have him hit the others. When you're fighting a helicopter, maybe kicking a grunt would work better where it's positioned, or an uppercut if below you, and these do huge amounts of damage. The game will never directly tell you to do this, but when you figure it out on your own accord, the satisfaction is immense, like you've broken how the game is supposed to function, yet it notices and rewards you with a higher rank. On the subject of rock-on combos, I'm going to quickly go over how the game encourages you to aspire for these. Chaining attacks and dodges will increase V points, rock-on combos will increase the multiplier. So to get a higher score, it's not one or the other, it's a mix of both. Build up some V points and then go offensive and multiply. The higher score you get, the more the audience cheers. And with the game centered around the silver screen, giving the audience a show is a great contextual reason to aspire for better play. You gotta make it look good for the camera. Occasionally, you'll find these blue gourds that replenish VFX, but if you find a red one, for a period of time, the meter is unlimited. It's like a powered up mode, but here's where it gets nuts. If you play it enough, you'll recognize the spawn locations for them. In episode 2, part 2, it's in a box accessible with max speed, followed by a narrow hallway with an object rolling towards you. Kill the enemies until one drops a key. So in a cramped hallway, with plenty of enemies showing up, you can be in this powered up mode. Oh buddy, this is peak action game goodness. If you can get a rock-on combo started and stay in slow, new enemies will spawn with the reticle. Nice to meet you. Bam, pow, zing! In moments like these, you're offered a taste of what's possible. Pink V's stacking into high double digits, multipliers climbing to numbers you thought impossible. It's a rush, comparable to when my childhood friends and I would mash all the coolest characters and powers we knew and make a game out of it on the blacktop. A sincere bliss where the bounds between fiction and reality blended together in a moment of perfection. Playing these sections, I would audibly gasp, saying things like, "There's no way this is happening, it can't possibly go higher," and when it did, I would laugh. When the fight's over, releasing that slow button and seeing the points at the highest it can go, 9,999, and the crowd goes wild. If I could bow in this game, I would. But I can't, so I'll flex instead. Thanks for coming out tonight. You're all beautiful. Here's another cool revelation. In the upgrade store, there are some sweet moves. Like Viewtiful Forever. If you get hit in slow-mo, Joe poses instead of taking damage and knocks down enemies at the cost of the remaining VFX bar. This move saved me quite a few times. There's also Ukemi that if timed correctly after a hit, Joe does this sweet recovery animation as the audience gasps and recover a heart. But the two I want to mention that are game changers are Red Hot Kick and Slide. The former lets you kick diagonally in the air, and the slide lets you move horizontally. The V-films positioned in similar directions through the levels. What I thought was obtuse placement at first shows a deliberate and subtle opportunity to use these moves that can also function as tools in combat to cover ground quickly. And check this out, the longer you hold the kick button to slide, the further Joe will move. It's not a fixed distance, it's in your control. Same with jumps. Joe can do 2 jumps in succession, but the distance can depend on how long you hold the button. There could be 2 light hops, 2 giant leaps, or mixing it up with a huge first one compared with a small bounce or vice versa. Realizing how tight these movement controls are made it clear that a lot of the hits or deaths wasn't the fault of the game, rather just a part of the learning process that was up to me to perform them correctly. I've been going on about all these details because it's insane how my opinion of this game changed with another playthrough. Parts I found frustrating or nonsensical make so much sense. Like the Gelbies that throw rocks like softballs have this tell where if they crouch or pound their chest, they'll cannonball towards you, but if you just duck, they'll overshoot and can be slow-mo punched for high damage. And the Battlefront 2 guys have this predictable logic with their combo. Whatever their second hit type is, they'll alternate with the last two. So if he punches, he's gonna kick then punch. If he kicks, he'll punch then kick again. With stuff like this, a mental light bulb flashes and enemies are no longer random, but following a fairly consistent script you can exploit. The boss rush mode can still be brutal, but each has some tricks to them. Like you can additionally ground Charles with a red hot kick, Hulk can be baited into 3 downward swings if you don't destroy the axe, and charge into a wall for a stun. Grant takes more damage outside of water, as well as his garbage spitting move can be dodged if you hug into him. And another Joe isn't so bad if you keep pressure on him. Slow-mo punches are extremely good throughout the game, but you can't just spam these because some enemies are invulnerable as they roll. You gotta pick your moments carefully. My V-rated playthrough was amazing, because with more time with Viewtiful Joe came understanding. Some enemy types arrive earlier than before, yet the game was faster, sleeker, and more stylish. I beat this mode at around 6 hours and 43 minutes, with episode rankings consecutive A's. If this was a report card, I'd be falsely labeled as the Whiz Kid. Yet, as dope as this is, the curtain hasn't closed yet. It's time for an encore. Ultra V-rated is the toughest difficulty in the game. Bosses have more HP, enemies hit way harder, and the skull markers that indicated where to dodge bailed. The last part originally scared me off when I first heard about it. How is it possible to dodge if the game doesn't tell you? Is it random? Will my enjoyment be slam dunked in the trash? Here's the weird part. Only by taking these away did I start to understand enemy tells. When an enemy attacks, if they roll their arms like an old-timey boxer, they're gonna punch. If they do this little shuffle, they're gonna kick. When this clicks, the skulls disappearing isn't so bad anymore. The exaggerated movements become easy counters. The part I found really surprising was how Ultra V rank wasn't so brutal. In fact, it felt just like V-rated, just a bit less forgiving with hits. It feels like a victory lap. You know what you need to do, and when you die, it's not this unknown factor. You know where you went wrong. Just do another take. The one part I was dreading was the boss rush mode in episode 6, originally for fighting 4 powered up bosses back to back. After a few attempts, I got through it. Charles got kicked and boomeranged, Hulk got a combo of cheeky dodges and slow-mo punches, Green ate some explosives, and another Joe got clowned. Peachy keen, man. But then I remembered they're called the Magnificent Five, and I fought the last member. Ultra V-rated has been groovy. I've been cruising and bruising these robots. There have been some tricky ones, like the plane section episode 3 or the Alistair fight, but nothing too funky. Fire Leo comes in and says, "Hold on a second, fella. Let me put you in your place." How would I describe it? Well, over 2 playthroughs and about 85% through the third, I've gotten the retry screen 59 times. Fire Leo on Ultra V-rated difficulty, let's just slap an extra 20 on there. The blocking goes like this. Fire Leo is going to run around the arena and shoot magma rocks as he does so. They'll drop onto the arena, and with some distance, he's going to spit out some fireballs that will circle around. What you need to do is mock punch the stones to light yourself on fire, classic move, sprint over to Fire Leo, punch him and destroy his fire aura and confidence in projectiles, break his buckler, then while he's spinning like his life depends on it, dodge 5 of his swipes, then punish when dazed. The trick is to use the skull indicator to show the direction of the tell oh no. Fire Leo turns into a blender that will shred your life bar in a matter of seconds. I've had attempts that have ended in less than a minute, my mouth agape at the challenge before me. If you get hit during one of the swipes, it's easy to spiral right into another one. Sound cues will be your best friend here. During his tornado move, there will be 2 different growls he'll make, each indicating the high and low swipes. Instead of trying to remember both of them, I just remembered high, and if I didn't hear it, time to duck. If you get hit during the tornado either directly or when slowed with a dodge, after the 5 hits he has a different growl. This one indicates a new cycle has begun. If you don't daze him after a couple, he hops right back into lava, confidence brimming as he spits fire. Executing this strategy can be a tall order. The mind is willing, but the flesh is slow. Sure, I would get salty about it in the moment, yet I could also recognize it's a fair fight. When he spits fire, smack him ASAP, because if he makes 3 waves of the fire move, your aura form will run out and give 3rd degree burns while breaking the shield. And even in part 2 where he swipes, if it's with the buckler arm, duck. If it's the opposite, dodge up. This paired with the sound cues makes the Fire Leo encounter a heavily skill-based one, but doable. You know what you need to do, it's just getting the timing right. And I will say that final attempt, with 1 more hit left as he dashes around the arena at lightning speed, making a gamble and punching him right in the forehead before taking a hit was incredible. It wasn't a cutscene, it was pure moment-to-moment gameplay, and knowing that victory was a sliver away from a defeat made that accomplishment feel tangible. With Fire Leo left on simmer, it's time for the final episode, and the final battle. What you see before you is an amateur recording of my fights with King Blue and then the Captain at his prime. I found the first part to be trickier out of the 2. King Blue has this move of shooting lightning vertically, which is fickle to dodge. Sometimes I could sprint around the world, other times I hugged near one and it would miss, other times it wouldn't. I never quite figured out how to tell besides taking a hit. Since it was the end of the game and I was hoarding V points on this playthrough, I would buy extra lives and take 2s, reviving at full health right where you died. What's funny is because 2 hits kill you on this difficulty, there were times where I looked at my HUD and went, where's my take 2? Oh right, he coughed on me twice. There's a laser that moves around the battlefield, pressuring you to be vigilant of the background. If it's about to touch, dodging up is your best bet. And then, we move to the final showdown. This is a great final fight. Captain Blue's health bar is a fraction of King Blue's. It's like the tutorial fights but ramped up, using powers from the V-Watch and shooting lightning, a damage type that can't be dodged in slow. The reason I bought extra lives is because if you die in this part, you need to do the King fight over again, which is my least favorite, so I'm gonna be prepared just in case. Boomerangs are sweet in this encounter too, not so much for their damage, but occasionally I can pull Blue over to the corner of the screen and land some punches. I like this fight quite a bit, it feels like a duel. That could be said for the other bosses, but there's something fitting about two superheroes fighting in space. No minions, no tricks, and no hazards besides those created by combatants. Just an opponent with similar abilities to you and sheer will, pulling poses and over-the-top moves to decide the fate of the world. Good stuff. The GameCube controller begins to feel moist as the hands gripping it begin to sweat, heart beating at an accelerated pace. The mind flips between confidence at practice movements with uncertainty. That wasn't the best move. The camera zooms in as punches make contact with the captain's torso and the unintentional but effective crotch shots. The hum of the GameCube melts away, the clicks of the buttons too as the lightning crackles on the stage and the techno-beaten guitar comes into focus. It's just a game. But at this moment, I've got one intention, one priority where everything else goes to the back burner. An earnest goal my soul demands, to just kick this guy's ass. Joe. I read this section a few days after playing that bit, and I'm thinking of the original expectation for accomplishing this. A feat that would definitively prove, without a doubt, I was really good at this game. Look out ladies, some fellas got that Sigma grind set and a lot of cabbage. Me? I played an action game for the Nintendo GameCube. The poor souls didn't have a chance. Yet, instead of that lasting pride, what I'm left with is a reminder at how much I have yet to learn. Don't get me wrong, I busted moves as the captain bemoaned his backstory. However, I did spam the boomerangs with King Blue, both for the absurdity of throwing a projectile as he laughed, repeating this cycle until KO, and because it seemed like the best tactic. Yet the fabled Rainbow V rank is possible for all stages. There's even runs online where players go through the entire game with that score, with all film reels collected. I don't say this as a way to negatively compare, rather to show that with enough time and dedication, feats like these are possible. There's this piece of advice that I've quoted a few times on this channel that can apply to most things in life. The more you do something, the better you get. You hear that and go, well yeah, of course, but when push comes to shove, how often do you embrace that initial attempt that misses the mark? I've avoided it more often than not. Yet by knowing it won't be perfect and doing it anyway, looking your shortcomings in the eye, giving a firm handshake and a smile, that's a damn fine start. And however I feel about it, comparing my rankings from my first playthrough on adult through my final, I must have been doing something right. Bonafide proof I'm decent at this game. I think I've had my fill of Viewtiful Joe at the moment, but who knows? If I find that Rainbow V run lulling me in like a siren to the rocks, maybe I'll come back to it. After this dip into Viewtiful Joe, I can confidently say Kamiya was cooking with this one. What first seemed like a charming if frustrating action game turned into a highly replayable one, full of depth with a unique 2D presentation that was so much fun I played multiple times back to back. That second playthrough was where it really clicked into place, and I would recommend giving it a shot if it sounds like your thing. The game also has a port for PS2, which I've been playing for footage, and wait a minute, you're in this too? Yeah, Dante's a playable character if you beat the game once. This game is so awesome. Speaking of awesome, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to rate this however you think, same with sharing your thoughts. More videos to come in the future, so subscribe if you're interested. Take care of yourself, and stay beautiful.
That's a wrap.